tell me your history. Won't get drunk, sip in your poetry. My dog lives sorrow, speaking in rhyme. When they start sipping the hobo wine. Oh, honey, I love nitroglycerine. Half a water gonna give them gasoline. My dog, I do declare, honey, I love, I'm a simple man. Need me's up, honey, gonna understand. My dog tell me, ooh, rockin' chair. Got no straight leg, gonna lay rock over there. Sometimes it seems whole world was down on me. I was a bad boy, did not intend to be. Yeah, buddy, now. No woman I love, so it's kinda sweet. When they talking better than Shaky Sugary. My dog, let's go. Ooh, riverside. Throw your gun in, keep the cafe puss and pie. I'm young and foolish, I would eat your leg. Got nobody since my mom moved in dead. Yeah, my dog, let's go back and tuck it. My dog, let's go. Kentucky gonna have some fun. Get drunk down, gonna look up at the sun. My dog lean in, so is sweet and kind. Ain't nobody I sure will, ain't no Clyde. I ain't no outlaw, honey now. My dog, tell me your history. Won't get drunk, in your poetry. My dog leans off, speaking in rhyme. When they start sipping the hobo wine. Something like that now. My name's Nat Myers, and that was my original hobo wine. Kind of based out of Carl Martin's Old Time Blues. Carl Martin, you know, his recording career spanned from I think the mid 1920s all the way up into I think the 70s. You know, depending on who you talk to, he wrote one of the original Crow Janies, or I think everybody who wrote a Crow Janie claims that they wrote the original Crow Janie, but I think Carl Martin actually might have it in the books as being the first one to record a version of it. I've been using the term a W.C. Handy moment as a blues enjoyer, as a listener of blues music. I feel like a lot of people who love the blues has what I call a W.C. Handy moment, where you tell yourself, just like W.C. Handy, where you hear the blues and you're just like, that was the most peculiar sound I'd ever heard before, you know what I mean? And Carl Martin was really kind of one of the genesises for that feeling. When I first heard Old Time Blues by him, I mean, he's playing out of that progression. I copped some of his lines from that song, I was young and foolish, I was easily led, but there was just something about that song. My dad used to travel a lot. Family used to travel a lot across the country, so he'd have tape decks and eventually CDs and stuff like that. I remember when that CD came on, or when that song came on from like a blues compilation he had, I was just like, what is that song? Like, what is this music? I remember listening to it like 100 times in the car, just over and over and over again, And yeah, just something captivated about me. And I don't think I'm good enough to play like Carl Martin, but he's got that mandolin flair to everything he does, which is like there's a certain technicality which evades me, that I think comes from his ability to transfigure his experience on the mandolin and bring it onto the guitar. He does a lot of flailing and things like that, like mandolin players do, but he's not doing it with a plectrum. He's doing it with his fingers and things like that. So I originally wanted to be a poet. Poetry was kind of my bread and butter. And I play music. I only picked up guitar to play blues. I never really been interested in doing nothing else. on guitar. And so I was just kind of like dilly-dallying for a long time before eventually started making the transition. And I mean, easily 12, 15 years passed since that moment where I, heard that music before I started being like, oh, like I can't, this ain't getting the gold out the pan, but it's like I'm scraping a little gold off the nugget now, you know what I mean? So it's starting to make a little more sense. And yeah, as I gotten older, I'm taking lessons. I'm all self-taught. Every once in a while, there's this dude named Frankie 12 Strings. Maybe you heard of him over on YouTube. But like, the old time community, they've done a good job at sticking cameras in their faces and putting it on YouTube. So there's some certain cats who really kind of hold it down to, I think, traditional's level of expertise, but also had the, I think the courage like some traditionalists don't have, which is to share that. So it's pretty cool.
Trying to have the fun sport. The law jumps upset, nobody run. Then he knows I'm long gone from Kentucky. Long gone, says I got so we lucky. Says I left Suki like say some rain. My woman pokes her head out from the window a little bit. She said, please don't let them kill Poe. Little that dead, no use worrying. Sweet mama ain't gonna be alone long enough to sing my worried song. Says I left Suki like say some rain. I knew the man, his name was Austin Jack. He set the bloodhound right on my track. The blindest one couldn't hid my scent. Couldn't tell where the little hat went. Says I left Suki, people I'd say some rain. Something like that. I'm worried, but I won't be worried long. I left San Antonio, I won't be back no more. When you heard the Santa Fe puff and fly, you should have seen the way I reached up and caught that blind. Another long gone from Kentucky. Long gone, says I got so we lucky. Says I left Suki like say some rain. Well, I don't play the dozen, neither does him. My woman with mine on, couldn't you win if he keeps on talking? Made me mad. Keeps on talking, tell your mom and your dad that I don't play the dozens. I clear that neither does him. Yeah, I'm long gone from Kentucky. Long gone, says I got so we lucky. Says I left Suki, I'd say some rain. Something like that now.
Blues ain't distillation. I think the blues is an evocation. It's not something that's to be preserved. It's something that should be evoked out. It's not something that should be. It's not like a spirit that you put in a cellar and keep preserved and pop out. And I think it. In all honesty, I think playing the blues is also some of the punkest shit you can be doing right now. There's no music that's ever touched kind of the depths of the chambers of my heart the way that the blues does, particularly pre-war blues. I'm starting to get a little more into like the more contemporary stuff, like sort of that the blues societies are mainly focused on, which is electric blues and things like that. And I'm down with that stuff too, but it's not something that I'm particularly interested in playing myself, partially because, I feel like there's a certain libertarianism, and I'm not trying to be political, but like in terms of sheer independence when it comes to being able to play acoustic blues music. I just love just that stripped down nature, and again, it goes back to as well my background in poetry. I think what country blues artists in the pre-war, but even country blues artists doing right now, and not just country blues, but Americana music, roots music going on right now. The troubadour gets overused. I think troubadour is a dirty word because it's like we're not singing romantic, like the poets that, well, maybe they kind of is, but like troubadours were company stooges back in their day. They worked for the nobles, and they wrote about courtly love. And that's not what the poets today are doing. I think of it more in the context of Homer or the griots of West African poetry. That kind of background, I think, is much more closer aligned than terms like troubadour. It's much deeper than that. What the blues is, in my opinion, and this is like, you know, maybe my own kind of American kernel, but it's like, yo, if Homer actually did live, yo, man, he was laying stuff out in a 12 bar for those fucking guys over in Greece. You know what I mean? That's my honest opinion. So, the blues, I think, is one of the only kind of musics, which, you know, the same thing with old country music, like traditional country, like what would have been called hillbilly music, but like Doc Boggs, Frank Hutchinson, you know, Darby and Tarleton. Those cats to me are like the real, I think the true kind of speakers to the experiences here in America, and no other music really compares to it. I think the American catalog, the epic nature of America, is being met, I think, most primarily not in literature, you know, it's being met by poets who are out there traveling on the road, whether or not they be playing blues or, you know, playing something else. But for me, the only sound that I really love playing is blues music. So, yeah, I always think about, I think the simple as simple does is the best things in things, you know, like if you're listening to Tommy McLennan, you know, his deep sea blues, you know, I think Tom McLennan's a master of the asides, because you hear this dude who's perhaps maybe not even confident, where you hear him on his speak, you know, in deep sea blues, he's going, but he's whispering to himself in between while he's warming. He's like, all right, Tommy, take it slow. Best one you got. You know what I mean? And I think that's what it boils down to. Take your time. You know, it's really about, especially just in concepts of syncopation, things like that. Just always follow that and, you know, don't forget that and, you know, and in between the beats. And, you know, I think the blues is kind of like riding a horse, but you always want to ride the back of the gallop a little bit, you know. And also it's like, I think it's weird, you know, since I've been able to come out here and play music, I think much more so the limitations rather than one's technical skill. I think the outside perspective of people perceiving about what a blues player is and shouldn't be is one of the big detractors from people getting into the genre itself. And I think that's like what it boils down to. I'm a walking oxymoron. I'm an Asian American playing what I think is primarily African American music, and so I'm a double oxymoron for a lot of people. And at the same time, I think anything that operates from a sense of prohibition, that you can't play this music, can't operate by this music, anything that prohibits you from doing something, it ain't gonna fly, because I ain't gonna stop playing blues music. The thousands of cats in Japan aren't gonna stop playing blues music. The French folkies aren't gonna stop playing blues music. And so it's like, I think just realizing like, yo man, just focus on yourself and don't think about nobody else but your own fingers in that moment. And I think when it comes to the blues as well, I'm kind of rigmaroling right now, but I think the thing with blues, like particularly country blues artists, when I come across other people who are abiders of a faith for this kind of music, I always come across somebody who has spent a lot of time by themselves, spent a lot of time with this music by themselves, spent a lot of time deep listening to this music, and are oftentimes players of the music themselves. And I think those all go hand in hand. And so it's just about listening to the blues. You know, at one point I weren't listening to nothing after 1945 for a long time. And being able to get out on the road and actually be able to see what people are engaging in, being able to collaborate with folks like that I knew were holding it down now, such as Don Flemings or Rihanna Giddens, or you know, John Tavis Willis is also another really big heavy hitter. Buffalo Nichols from Fat Possum right now. Those cats I think are really holding up in a way where people are like, nobody plays your way. It's like you're speaking from ignorance, because the truth is like there's a lot of people playing country blues right now, and they're doing a damn good job of it too. Oh, it's curious, mate. Like, I'm starting to make sense. Like, I know when someone's doing an A string or like something like that, but yeah, you do have to do kind of like a bunch of hoodoo in your mind to flip everything around. And it's vice versa for cats who want to play with me too. They're like, oh, okay, that is at a G, or like that is at a E. I'm curious, man, you know, because I think the transition, like it's interesting, the left and the right brain mentality, but like whether or not being a left-handed, like maybe kind of hiccups me in terms of being able to play like these right-handed players I admire. I'm not too sure. It's curious to me, but I think it was a slow process once you learn the chords, and I think much more so less focusing on what something looks like and more focusing on what it sounds like has been like the big kind of game changer for me. But yeah, sometimes I still like when I see James Hunter, I'm just like, what the fuck is he doing? But he's like playing out of he's playing out of G or like B flat or something like that. I'm just like, it can't be that simple. You know what I mean? Anyway, yeah. So. This fella's I think it's called a Mavis. I think it's Coldwood. It's made by this fella. They're called Mule Guitars. I like to say it kicks back a lot like a mule too. It's like learning a completely new instrument almost. And kick back just in terms of like you need to learn how to ply a mule. You know what I mean? And I think these instruments are really powerful and really strong. And I was really blessed to come in contact with it. It's funny, I recently posted this thing about I'm doing this Americana Fest down the line, and I'm sitting in a Mason chair with like my good hat on, and I'm like holding I'm holding a mule guitar, and like some cats were saying like, "Oh, music's doing you really good. You got a new hat, you got a new guitar, you got a new all this kind of shit." But it's like, nah, bro, I'm still pretty dirt poor right now. I've just been lucky enough to meet really wonderful people who by asking nothing from them have given me everything. It's really kind of how it goes. So Matt Ike, this lady named KK Hammond over in England, she plays blues over there. She sent my stuff over to Matt Ike, and Matt Ike. So I'm not trying to name drop nobody, but Matt Ike sent my stuff over to Jason Momoa, the actor, who happens to be a huge blues fan, a huge blues player himself, and I think both of us being kind of like off the beaten path of what people can. We just immediately like were drawn to each other, and I remember there's a good wait time on these guitars, and it's something I always window shopped, and him and Matt really worked to get one of these instruments in my hand. It was really funny because they were like, "Do you want a steel?" They were like, "We want to get you a guitar. Do you want a steel body or do you want a Mavis?" And you could tell by their voices they're like they want to give me a Mavis. I was like, man, I really love them steel bodies. And they're like, you sure? Like, you sure you want that? And I was like, yeah. So I got the steel body, but then like a couple weeks later, they had sent this in the mail to me as well. So it's just like absolutely wonderful people. Hawaiian folkies call it ohana. Even if you ain't blood, and they've really shown me what ohana means. They really brought me into their fold. So. It's awesome being able to play this instrument for people out, and most people have no idea, kind of the genesis of it. I always get a kick kind of telling people because it's like, I don't know, sometimes there's like 3 or 4 people who like off the cuff when I tell them the story they believe me. Other times it's just like, all right, you know what I mean? It's like a Tinder profile description, you know what I mean? You're ginning yourself up, but it really happened that way. So. I feel like kind of like Freeman Vines, the guitar maker. I watched an interview with Dom Fleming. I'm pointing over there because there's a picture of Dom Fleming's over there. Dom Fleming's he was in conversation with him from Music Maker, which is a really fabulous blues foundation that helps support particularly rural blues musicians, continue to make a living. And he did an interview with Freeman Vines, and Freeman Vines talks about when he was like real young, he went to see this cat. I can't remember his name, but he went to see him just kind of like in a hole in the wall. And he said there was something about this dude's tone that was just incredible. And Freeman Vines was like, for the past 40 years I've been making guitars trying to find that tone. I still ain't found it, And so in a certain regard, it's like kind of like that. It's like the quest for the Holy Grail, and at the same time, like where the perfectionist idea of what your tone's going to be is never going to be something that you're going to achieve. At the same time, it's like when you find something that sounds really great. One of my big things about tone was like I'd blame guitars rather than myself. But the reality is like it don't matter how big your guitar collection gets. Like you should be able to get a really beautiful tone out of a 1950s harmony if you're able to play guitar right, And I think there's this misconception that's partially like I think fueled by you know, the consumeristic aspect of gearheadedness that, you know, like we're constantly like told to buy more and more stuff to change our tone, make it better. But in reality, like the simple is the simple does, I think, in a lot of regards. Like, and so I don't know. I just think about what, Freeman Vine said. It's like something I'm always chasing after. And like when Fraulini, you know, I was talking, you know, I got my Fraulini guitar. That's where I just realized I was like, I got to stop complaining about what I'm playing on because clearly it's me at this point. Right? Like it's clearly me. If Don Flemings can make his thing, it's like then I got a lot of practice to do. You know what I mean? That's how I feel about it. Maybe other people are different, but my big thing was like making, you know, my ego got in the way. I guess, you know, it's like I'm doing it right, but like how come it don't sound right? You know, it's like no, you're not doing it right neither. You know what I mean? So. I always think it's funny, man. Like, you know, Fred McDowell always saying, I don't play no rock and roll, most rockin' I do's in my rocking chair. But we all know that he's doing the most rock and roll shit, right? We all know it.